Did you know that 90% of the world's data was created in just the last 2 years? Marketers today are flooded with information, yet many still struggle to turn that data into real insights. That's why today we are discussing strategic AI reporting and how it can deliver true value. Welcome to Humanology on Air. Well, marketers, we said we wanted more data, and here we are drowning in numbers. How well are we using this information? Are we smarter or just busier? These are the questions we have for our Senior Director of Performance Media, Travis McDougall. Thanks for joining us, Travis.
I'm glad to be back, Terri.
So Travis, what is your take on the state of data right now and how it's affecting how we're reporting?
So I really think we have to understand what's getting in our way with the reporting process. Is it too much data? Are we focusing on the wrong metrics? Are we not being able to generate insights that are timely or that our executive team maybe cares about? So I think that really brings us to the point of, well, how do we use this transformative AI technology with reporting to be able to really determine and help solve these problems and challenges? But again, you really have to understand what you're solving for first. And that'll help us uncover the pathways that we need to take in order to deliver reporting that is more effective and efficient.
Let's start by talking about friction. Reporting is supposed to help us make better decisions, but we're spending more time untangling the data than really actioning on it, right?
That's exactly right. So we're swimming in data, like you mentioned before, all the dashboards, the different accounts that we have access to, internal data that you might have. And you would think that, all of this access to data is actually making things a lot more clear and straightforward, but it's not, because you don't know how to consolidate some of the data. You're not understanding what's really most important for the business or the organization to focus on. And you're kind of in this analysis paralysis now, and people are just spending too much time looking at things that maybe actually don't make sense for the business and not able to get down to the insights and the data points that actually are going to drive the business forward.
So Travis, what are some of the major challenges that you see marketers facing?
So one of the big things that we're hearing from clients is that reports aren't strategic. So, we're presenting a lot of information and a lot of data, but they're not feeling that there's a lot of value coming out of the insights or the data that's being presented. So you're really seeing this, all of this information overload, conflicting clients and teams around where should we be spending our time trying to drive insights for the business that are going to move the company forward.
Yeah, I've seen that too, especially when we're trying to connect data across multiple platforms and such. It can get pretty messy pretty fast.
So that's a good point. So I think that actually brings us to our second issue, which is fragmented data in different data silos. So think about a lot of companies nowadays have CRM data, they have their website data, potentially their sales platform data like Google Ads or Meta, and all of this is living in separate places. So thinking about these data silos, well, how are you getting all of this data from different platforms into a holistic view of the business? I think to even add to that complexity is a lot of these data privacy issues that are happening right now with cookie deprecation. So even thinking of your analytics data, you might see anywhere from 40, possibly 50% of your actual customers not even being recognized on the platform because they're not consenting to being tracked on your website. So, you're seeing a lot of these tools like GA4 even modeling conversion data to even fill in those gaps before you even get it into a consolidated view. So I would definitely say that's a second point that is causing a lot of issues with reporting and insights right now.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when we're reporting, it's almost like you were trying to put a puzzle together and there's just pieces kind of missing everywhere.
That's right. It's like somebody shook the box and then threw a piece out somewhere and you're trying to figure out where it goes. And another thing is the reports just aren't actionable. So you'll see a lot of data trend lines and, say our click-through rates are up or our website sessions are up or our traffic's down, whatever the report happens to be looking at. But it's always missing the so what. And I think this is where a lot of teams are really struggling right now, is to find the so what and how does that really impact business outcomes and being able to tie those pieces together. So internal stakeholders, most likely your C-level teams, understand what really all of this data means and what it means to their bottom line.
So what I'm hearing is that because we are sifting through all this data, there's not enough time to really focus on strategy. Right. We are dealing with data silos and oftentimes missing information, and there is a lack of actionable insights. So what are we doing to kind of help address these challenges that marketers are facing?
So there's a few things that we're trying to help our clients with. One of the first is unifying their data. So like we mentioned before, there's different platforms where your data could exist. It could be your CRM, your website, or your ad platforms. And really having that centralized view is important to any analysis you're going to do, any reporting that you're going to do. So ideally, you'd want to get it into a centralized data source. So some sort of cloud instance that you might have where all your data is stored, or a data lake. Some clients could even do it in Excel or a Google Sheet. Maybe it's not the most advanced way of doing it, but just having a unified data set is probably the first step you need to take in any of this journey that you're going down before you start getting into any of the more advanced stuff.
Yeah, and that would make sense because any kind of blind spots in your data would mean gaps in strategy. So, once you have everything unified and consolidated, what's the step after that?
So after you've unified your data, I would say the next step would be visualizing the data in some sort of a visualization tool. This really forces teams and marketers to look at what's really important, because if you try to get all of the data points that you have sort of in your raw data source into a visualization tool, it becomes very mucky pretty quickly. So you really have to make strategic decisions around what information is important to the business, what is going to lead to actionable insights, and what strategies are you going to try to come up with afterwards. There's lots of different tools that teams use, Looker Studio, there's Datorama, there's Power BI, Tableau. It really just depends on what your organization is using and what the team is more comfortable with. But that would be the next step after unifying your data, is getting into some sort of visualization tool and making strategic decisions on what information is most pertinent to the business and the success of the organization.
Yeah, I feel like not only does it kind of help speed things up a bit, it also gives a bit more kind of like clarity and confidence when you're looking at the data.
And I think something else to add to the KPIs is really around the business objectives. So a lot of companies struggle like, well, what are really the core KPIs we should be looking into? So think about revenue. What is your customer retention? What is your profitability? If you're an e-commerce business, what is your return on ad spend? These are all things that you would consider sort of key business objectives that you'd want to have highlighted in your reporting. So that way, any insights that you're gleaning from your report are actually actionable towards that end business outcome that you're trying to achieve. So again, I think it's important to get the visualization in place, but you really do have to spend time understanding what the business goals are and making sure that those are what are reflected in the reporting, and you're kind of not looking at the vanity metrics as much, because that's where a lot of people get stuck in that analysis paralysis and spending on time on things that don't make sense or drive the business forward.
Okay, Travis, so you've mentioned consolidating the data, visualizing the data, making sure that's being tied back to business objectives. These sound like things that businesses should already be doing. So how is something like AI helping move this forward?
So AI is actually already helping in a lot of ways, even when it comes down to the data consolidation. So as we mentioned before, even in GA4, AI is extrapolating data and kind of filling in some of those data gaps. So even before you're getting to any sort of insights, AI is actually already helping fill in some of those gaps, which is one way of doing it. What you're seeing now is a lot of companies moving towards AI-driven insights. So inherently, a lot of human beings cannot look at vast data sets and pick out trends. There are very few people that, one, like doing that stuff, and two, are very good at it. So what you're seeing now is, with these tools like ChatGPT and Gemini, being able to look at large data sets and pull out information that maybe you or I couldn't see or understand from just looking at a vast spreadsheet. So that's another way that you're seeing it. But you do have to understand that there needs to be some human input as part of that as well. So these large language models are really good at coming up and interpreting results, but is it really important for the business? Is it really focusing on the data points that are important for the organization? So I think that's where you're seeing more of the human input coming into it, and making sure the models are actually picking up on the data and trends that are important for the organization, and maybe not focusing on the vanity metrics. And I think from a more advanced standpoint, where a lot of companies are trying to get to is with MMM models. So think of Google's new tool Meridian and the data sets that are coming out from that tool, and using AI to actually predict future outcomes. So you can use AI to not only help get the data together in a way so it makes more sense for these platforms to be able to analyze it. You have insights that are coming from AI, being able to bubble up trends that people or humans may not be able to generally understand. And then lastly, you have AI helping with modeling and forecasting. So based on different scenarios, what are some business outcomes that could come out of these different campaigns or strategies that you're trying to test out?
Travis, can you give us an example of this playing out for one of our clients?
Yeah, I can actually think of a really great example. So we had a client, lots of different data, lots of different platforms that they were working on at any given time. They wanted weekly reporting to look at the KPIs and how things were trending. This was typically aggregated in a spreadsheet, done pretty manually. How are we pacing towards our goals? And it's very cumbersome. And trying to get insights from that, as the agency or even the client, it's very difficult. Humans inherently aren't good at just looking at large data sets and being able to extrapolate information. So this is a really good example of how can we leverage reporting automation and AI to help, really sift through and alleviate that burden on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it sounds like, it was a bit of a nightmare, a little bit familiar as well. So what did your team, how did they tackle that challenge?
So the way that we helped tackle this challenge for the specific client was we actually moved everything over to a Power BI dashboard. So that actually has some Copilot capabilities incorporated with it. So thinking about, rather than looking at a spreadsheet on a weekly basis, you're looking at a visualization tool. The thing that's really good about Power BI and Copilot enabled with it is that you can actually get insights from the dashboard itself. So you can click on different data sets within it. It actually does high level reporting or insight generation based on sort of this data anomaly. If you have a client that has sort of the full suite of Copilot enabled, you can actually query within the Power BI report, similar to how you would with like a ChatGPT or a Gemini, which was really helpful. So even if we weren't able to answer all the questions on the client call, the client could take that information or the dashboard back, and they could actually look for some of the answers without having to immediately come back to us. Now, did it answer all questions they have? No, of course not. But it's one of those tools that did enable both teams to, one, find insights and anomalies better and be able to understand what those trends are prior to the meeting or even after the call when we may not be on chatting with them.
Travis, it sounds like that format of reporting is something that would be really helpful to clients.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely very transformative for the client and the team that we're working on. So being able to consolidate all the data into a single source of truth, getting into a visualization tool. In this case, it was Power BI, automating the data refresh so it was happening weekly and it wasn't something that teams were consolidating manually. Really helped us get down to the insights and what are the next steps, what are we actioning. Again, if we were trying to make improvements on a weekly basis, spending 2 days on reporting is kind of a waste of time. So if you think about the time savings and getting down to what the team is going to do next in order to help improve performance week over week, it was definitely transformative. So think of saving upwards of 20 to 40% of your time on a weekly basis if it's weekly reporting. By following a process like this, it's huge time saving for all team members.
All right, Travis, you are very familiar with how we start to wrap up our episodes of Humanology on Air. We're going to do some rapid fire Q&A. You good?
Yep.
Awesome.
Ready.
So question number one, what is the kind of biggest mistakes that you see businesses making when it comes to their reporting?
I would say focusing primarily on surface level metrics, not understanding what is actually a business KPI. See it happen all the time. Or maybe if you have teams that are very isolated in what they do and they don't see the full picture of what's going on, you'll have teams that are reporting back to the business on things that maybe don't make sense or driving the bottom line for the organization.
Travis, we've heard you talk about both in this episode and previous episodes how AI can help kind of fill in some of the missing data and gaps from privacy issues. How does that happen?
Yeah, so I'll go back to the example I used before. So GA4 is a really good example of that. Knowing that there's a lot of data points that it's not collecting based on these privacy rules and cookie consent banners. GA4 does help extrapolate and model some of the data, so that way you can get a better, more complete picture of what's happening on your site. Again, it's not 100% accurate, but this is where you're seeing tools like GA4 use modeling and AI to help extrapolate data and fill in some of those gaps.
Travis, what tools or platforms would you recommend that marketers explore if they kind of want to elevate their reporting?
So I'd probably say start with data visualization tools if you're not using one. So Looker Studio, which is a Google product. You have Power BI, which is a Microsoft product. You have Datorama, which is Salesforce, and you have Tableau. That kind of can work with multiple different platforms, all depending on the data set. But ultimately, it really depends on the organization, client, or agency. There might be a preference based on their internal privacy or even their internal business suite, right? So again, a lot of clients that we have are on the Microsoft suite of tools. So Power BI is a natural tool that they would be more inclined to use, and it meets all their sort of privacy regulations internally. So again, I think they're all great tools. They all have their pros and cons. I think it really depends on your organization, where the data is sitting, and what sort of privacy rules that you're trying to navigate. So I know usually, Terry, you're the one asking me questions during this part of the segment, but I actually have one for you. So how have we helped marketing teams get stakeholder alignment for reporting internally with our clients?
Yeah, a lot of our clients work in really close collaboration with sales teams and the C-suite. And I think when it comes to putting reports together, it's about making sure that we're not just speaking kind of like marketing speak, that we are tailoring reports to their needs as well. So it's not just about those vanity metrics and things of that nature. It's about what matters to them, like how are we delivering quality leads? How are we nurturing those leads? How are we helping retain customers? Because those are the types of things that matter to those individuals. So it's about putting reports together that not only fulfill marketing needs, but also the needs of other people that are important on their team. If today's conversation sparked any ideas or questions, please let us know. Visit our website at jenkelly.com to watch more episodes of Humanology on Air, to connect with members of our team, and to see how we combine technology and human insights to deliver results. Thanks for watching Humanology on Air.